to go ahead and call this meeting to order and declare a quorum of 7 members present. Welcome to the new boardroom, and just so that everyone is aware, it's much larger, which I know you can tell, but just so that you remember to put on your microphone and to actually speak into the microphone with it turned on when you're speaking. It does better for the filming, so I'm told. We're going to move to item C1, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to middle school branding. And before I open it up to the administration for their discussion, I just want to clarify some things regarding this item. First of all, I want to thank those in the community that took time to take the survey. We had over 2,000 respondents and that gave us feedback, and for that we're always very appreciative. I do think that there needs to be some clarification in terminology so that everyone within the community understands as we go forward in this discussion. Rebranding does not equal rezoning. Those are two different issues. Rebranding has to do with what we think is important for middle school students. Rezoning is changing attendance zones for schools within our school district. So I want to be sure people understand that. The other thing that we got a lot of feedback on is that there was some disappointment within the community in the way rezoning was done in the middle schools. Okay, and when we talk about rezoning, or when the future boards talk about rezoning, I am sure that that will be addressed. That is not the same as rebranding. The other thing that is very important for the community to understand, lots of numbers get thrown around and then there's not clarity on what they mean. And a number of the emails or email responses we got, we shouldn't have 20-80, 50-50, 20-80. Okay, that's a conversation for the future. I do think it's important that the community understands the school that currently is zoned to split 50-50 is not Welborn Middle School. It's College Station Middle School. There seems to be some confusion in that. It's the new school, it'll be divided in half, it doesn't matter. There's a lot, I see head shaking. I can tell you, out of 2,000 people in this community, there's a lot of people that think it was Welborn Middle School. That's something that needs to be clear. The other thing that needs to be clear is that, yes, in the future of this school district, there is the expectation that there will be 3 high schools when we reach 25,000 students. When we have 3 high schools, we will also have 4 or 5 middle schools. Math still tells me you can't have feeder patterns if you have 4 or 5 middle schools into 3 high schools. I think that's important for the community to understand. The other thing that I think is important is this board is historically been very focused on ensuring we get the best education for all students in this district. And I think as we go forward with today's meeting and any subsequent meetings, you will see that that continues to be the focus, that it's for all 13,648 students within the district that we're going to do the best. So with that, Dr. Ely, C1.
Thank you, Dr. Yokin, members of the board, and just welcome everybody in the community that's here. This is going to be a little different, so I ask your patience a little bit with us. We'll make sure that we get the levels. This is the first time we've been in here, so it sounds like I'm really loud. Am I really loud? No, we're good. Dr. Yokin is good? Okay, thank you very much. And we're trying to work it, make sure we get the cameras all right and everything. So excited to be in our new boardroom. Thank you to the citizens of College Station ISD and the 2013 bond issue that will allow us to be able to reclaim this warehouse for a number of meeting spaces and offices. So that being said, moving on to kind of where we are with middle school branding, I just would like to talk a little bit more about kind of where we are today, and it's a result of some discussions that were begun back in 2016 in the latter stages of boundary adjustment. The board and administration listened to a lot of feedback from the community, really in regards to a number of students in smaller groups of students who would have to go to different places than a majority of their peers in that same school. We heard about numbers of fourth graders being split. We heard about it at the middle middle school and intermediate school level. And I think the board really took that information to heart. And at that time, in 2016, they told the administration to make sure that as we go forward, that no students are at a disadvantage in high school by virtue of the middle school they attend. And so we've been working on that in a number of different processes to ensure that that happens. Also during that time, the discussion began with perhaps it was time for the district to think about the culture and climate of our middle schools, and is this the time to maybe perhaps take them away from such a strong relationship with their high schools. We tabled that discussion for a while. We brought that back up this summer in August, and we've discussed it now in August, September, and October. And hopefully we'll be able to finish that discussion this evening and move one direction or the other. But the board's desire was really to look at those students who would be potentially negatively affected. They wanted to look and make sure that all kids had the opportunity to be successful. And I would say, in working with this board as long as I have, that is not an uncommon conversation for this board to have. Oftentimes it's about student performance, and it's about students who might be educationally disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged, or students of color or from poverty. And we might be talking about math scores or reading scores. But in this situation, we're talking about kiddos in the middle school level who happen to be going to a different place than a majority of their peers. So it's that was kind of the background of the conversation, at least the genesis of it. I would submit to the board and to the community that where we are in rebranding largely has to do with where we view ourselves in the history of this school district. As you know, we were chartered in 1909. We had our first graduates in 1922. We moved off campus in the 40s over on Hollick Street. And we've had two different demographers tell us that eventually we're going to have 25,000 students. 3 comprehensive high schools, 4 or 5 middle schools, 4 or 5 intermediate schools, and possibly up to 17 elementaries. So I submit if we stand here in history and where we are today in College Station ISD with opening up our 3rd middle school, feeding into our 2 comprehensive high schools, and we look back, if we look backwards, then rebranding doesn't make sense, because A&M Consolidated High School has a rich tradition. If you look at College Station Middle School and College Station High School, they have done a lot in the last 5 or 6 years to really develop their particular brands and their climate and cultures on their campus. But I also submit if you stand here where we are in our history now and look forward, knowing we're going to have 3 comprehensive high schools and 4 or 5 middle schools, knowing this is the first time we're going to be splitting our middle schools in the way that we are, I would submit that it does make sense to look at this, and this would be the appropriate time right before opening up Welborn Middle School. A number of comments on the survey that came back to us had to do with proposed changes in regards to the cost associated with this. The administration has been going back and looking at the cost and looking at net costs as far as things that we would have to do anyway versus what we'd have to spend specifically at this particular point to change a mascot or a color at a middle school. We've eliminated $476,000 worth of cost to replace doors. College Station Middle School, that was the biggest item on the list that you saw. Those are blue laminate doors, and we believe that they will be able to work fine for us moving forward. We also, with the help of Mr. Martindale and John Hall, looked at the life cycles of some particular items at our current middle schools, talking about AMCMS and College Station Middle School. Looked at the life expectancy of the vinyl composition tile, of the paint, of the millwork, of the carpet, those types of things that we have in there, and we discovered that some of them, many of them in fact, are beyond their life cycle. Some of them are approaching it, and some of them are not just yet. And so we could hold off on doing something in those particular ways. So going into the schools and updating these items, these would be on our radar soon. So we would need to be doing refurbishing in these particular schools. So we have the option to take a few of these items at a time or delay some of them to a little bit later. And finally, I would just say, when we talk about the culture and climate of our middle schools and our high schools, I think this is, as I said earlier, an opportunity for us as a district to break that association between middle school and high school. College Station ISD has had a rich tradition of thinking of our school district as one entity. And I think the more that we can think of our intermediates and our middle schools especially as intermediates and middle schools helps us as a district see ourselves as one entity and not two different sides of town. With that, I'd love to answer any questions that you have and listen to the conversation. I've asked Mr. Martindale to be up here with me because should we get into more specifics regarding some of the cost of the items or timelines, he's got that information ready to share with the group.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. Questions?
I mean, I'd like to see the numbers that, I know a few of us asked for, I guess a month ago, the number that got thrown out was either 2.2 or 2.3 million. And I think it was unfortunate it got thrown out because it caused a lot of consternation. And I know that you mentioned 476,000 we've cut off from the doors at CSMS, so that gets us down to about, what, 1.75. I know uniforms are in there that I think we had at about 300,000, and those are things we're gonna be doing anyway. What's the breakdown now? I mean, just the bottom line on what's the cost we're looking at?
Do you have the table that you sent out in transmittal on the slide?
On
I
a
mean,
slide, no.
Well, see, I'd pull it up on my phone, but I don't want to be rude.
As far as uniforms, the total price initially, of course, that was for 3 middle schools. Wellborn is going to occur regardless, part of opening the building, so you reduce that cost by a third automatically. Then there's a natural rotation of replacement of various uniforms, and in visiting with Mr. Reed and kind of getting that rotation schedule, there were various items that were coming up to be replaced for next year anyway, some football uniforms and those types of things. So ultimately, the price went down to, 135 is, I believe, what I could accomplish the soft lines, the uniform piece for that are new or additional costs, Mr. Nugent. When we take into account the things we would need to do or already planning on doing. So the actual new cost to the district for this, as far as uniforms, would be $135,000.
You want to maybe total that up right there? So looking at the facilities costs all told between the two schools, is $1.77 million, $1,770,476. Again, some of those things we would, it would be our thought that we would not do those all at the same time, that we would do some of those when we're in the schools, as we have money available to address those. Some maybe this year, some in different summers, some others as we have the ability to be able to address them.
What was the number that Mr. Martindale gave us last month that were already in the plans for AMCMS and CSISD for the refurbishing,
The 1.77.
okay,
Those would be items that we would address through the natural process of the facilities.
Okay, but
Right.
does that include what Mr. Hall gave us on that slide afterwards? Because, I think that slide got lost in the conversation a little bit with Mr. Hall, that we were having, what we were already going to do to help A&M Consolidated and CSMS come up to standards of the other middle school. There was a slide that we had where we were going to do some additional.
Those were for flex spaces, probably, if I believe collaboration spaces are the work that they have been planning and part of the bond for this current summer coming up at the existing middle schools.
Did that include some paint and some changes in flooring and that kind of thing?
I think that was primarily cost for the collaborative spaces.
Okay.
Similar to what occurred at the intermediates this past year prior to opening Pecan Trail Intermediate. The original number we began with, as Mr. Nugent said in the beginning, was 2.2 million. What has been backed out of that, as Dr. Ely mentioned, are the doors, which were 475,000, as well as some signage at A&M Consolidated Middle School that was just under 12. So ultimately, that's $1.77 million. That includes paint, millwork, VCT, those types of things that are due to be addressed in the upcoming years that are past their life expectancy, that whether they're addressed now or later, that probably would be on the next bond for a deferred maintenance type of item. So those particular costs are going to be costs that we incur at some point in time, regardless of the rebranding component, if that makes sense, Mr. Nugent.
I think it does. So what I'm hearing is there's literally no added expense.
The added cost, if all of it, that's just natural occurrence facility
Right.
upkeep that would have to be addressed. The really true cost is picking up some additional replacement of uniforms. Then once we take into account Wellborn Middle School as part of opening, and that's bond funds and considered part of opening that facility, the natural rotation that Mr. Reed and I got that information from him as far as what items they were already looking to replace at the middle school athletic level for next year, and backing that out, that left me at 135. So new cost total, if it's just something that would not have occurred, that would in essence be your new cost. The facility items are going to continue to be something that has to be addressed at some point in time. And if I may add, Dr. Ely, that those things have to be done at some point in time, and they will take time. The things that provided on that list are not something that can happen in a semester. They can't happen all next summer. It would take, I would assume, and Mr. Hall can correct me if I misspeak here, at least 2 to 3 summers probably to accomplish all of that work, because that's a significant scope.
Would you think that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Sheriff, can I just add to that? I want to make sure that also there would be some new costs associated with graphics, obviously, if we change the colors in middle school, so there would, and mascot, there would be a little bit with that. And so really what we're talking about is the timing of these costs. So, sorry, Mr. Schaefer. Okay.
Would you think that what we did to the intermediate school, let's go back, I think where a lot of people in the community have possibly lost sight is what we did for the intermediate school when we opened this last year. How could you make a comparison of what we did to those facilities and refurbish that we could compare it to the school?
So you're talking about Oakwood Intermediate School, correct? So we did a number of things at Oakwood Intermediate School. Part of the 2015 bond was to go to our current, at that time, intermediates and middles and add flexible instructional spaces. So we did that at Cypress Grove and we did it at Oakwood. But we also went and on the exterior, and we upgraded the exterior with the Nichi hot panels. We went through and we redid all of the vinyl composition tile that was mismatched throughout the school, and we did one consistent color scheme with marmoleum throughout there. We redid paint as well, and we also did in the entryway as you go into Oakwood, we opened up with a flexible collaboration space, kind of an opening right as you get into the school building. So what we were able to do is make a number of needed cosmetic changes and take a school that had mismatched color schemes throughout it and freshen it up with some tile and carpet as well as paint, and really made a huge difference at Oakwood Intermediate School.
Thank you. I think I have a little bit of trouble with the term branding or rebranding. And I guess it's back to my days at the Mays School where I'm on the numbers side. Sorry, Dr. West. Where accounting and finance.
They can't hear you, Jeff.
Let me scoot it close. Can you hear me better? Okay, that's going to be awkward. Where the numbers start to confuse the issue, and I think that a good point was made there. I mean, if you add up what we spent at Consol in the time that we opened CSHS, it was a big number. And part of that is when we're opening a new school, we have historically looked at other schools at that level to make sure that they're on par and that we're having, I think the term we use a lot is equity or comparability at the facilities. So we did a lot of both refreshing but also very substantive structural work in the front entranceway. It's what really stands out to me. And in the use of the term rebranding, I think what we're doing is melding a lot of these concepts and things together. And I think, in my mind, what I've condensed it down to is we really have kind of one decision point, and then a lot of other things that either we're not going to be involved in because that's their job, or things that we were going to do anyway. To me, I've kind of identified 4 issues, and one of them is things that build the school identity, and this is where I think our decision point is. It's, do we do things that help a middle school build its identity separate and apart from the 1 or 2 high schools to which its students will ultimately go? And that is things, the color, the mascot, those are the big issues. The other things, like we hear a lot about middle school splits when we're using this term. That's a rezoning discussion. That has nothing to do with our discussion here tonight. And the two, in my mind at least, are not the same. And we can have a school with its own identity that ultimately has kids going to both high schools or to one, and it's fine either way as far as I'm concerned. So the middle school splits aren't here for discussion tonight. The other one is the middle school programming, and that's how these guys handle the programs offered at a school. And in our training, we talk about above the line and below the line. And to me, how athletics, fine arts, academics, all of those programs mesh together as students move from one grade to the next or from one school to the next, that's their job. That's what they do. They're tasked with figuring out what gives these students the best chance of success, and we've all been through those discussions. And then the last thing of the 4 is the idea of refurbishment, or not continuing to deferred maintenance. And that's consistent, and that's the Oakwood example, or what we did at Consol. These are things that we're going to do anyway, and it's things that you all know and have seen. You've lived in this community long enough. You know that what we want is good, fresh schools at each and every level, and that's just part of it. And I was very glad to see that breakdown in useful life and things. It's clearly below the line stuff that, quite frankly, we don't want to be involved in and shouldn't be, because y'all are the experts in it. So to me, I think the focus is on the building school identity, and I'm just one of 7 sitting up here. But I think the question is, are we in favor of building those school identities or not? And if the answer is no, well, then we leave it as is. And if the answer is yes, we have a recommendation from them to go a certain path. So I think, at least in my view, that's where our discussion is, not middle school splits, not how they handle their programming, and not really the refurbishment, other than obviously that does require some money, and we typically say, if you can do it in the budget, do it. If you need a bond, let us know. We'll then go through that process. But that's kind of how I ended up breaking it down in my mind to make sense of it. Thoughts?
Thank you.
I think we need to acknowledge the feedback that we got off this survey, which if I would encourage those of you in the audience who have not looked at this to not waste trees, but we got a lot of feedback, I think. And I think it's important to note that, I looked through, I can't say that I read every single word in there. I think you can make of this feedback whatever you want to make of it, is the reality. We had a lot of people who were against this notion of rebranding. Some of which were very clearly against it because they felt like rebranding equated to the boundary adjustment splits. And they were in favor of 100, 150, 50. I think there were some people that were very strongly against rebranding because they did not believe that it was worth spending money on and taxpayer dollars on. And I think we just had some people who just didn't think it was a good idea. And so I think all those certainly came out. We had a good portion of people who I think on the whole came out relatively indifferent. And we had a good portion of people who felt like rebranding and creating identities was a good idea. You know, out of 2,000, I think it's impossible to go through and tick mark where everybody came down on things, partly because what they said was a very subjective, you know, I think two people could look at that, some of these statements and say, well, this person's for, this person's against. But I think it's safe to say anybody that reads through this is going to walk away knowing that we have a very mixed amount of feedback that does not lean overly heavy in one direction or the other, especially if you take out people who believe that this is a boundary adjustment split issue and not a different issue. And I think those two things are hard to tear apart. So I think we appreciate the feedback. I'll be honest, I don't, and I think I said this at our last board meeting, I'm not shocked that we had a lot of variance, and I'm not shocked that it didn't come out crystal clear. Partly because of doing this on a survey kind of format, and partly because I think a lot of these issues are just confusing to put together. I went through the process of looking at this issue, and a lot of times I think when I do this, me kind of writing stuff down helps me kind of put things in perspective, at least in my own mind. And so I wrote some stuff down. Schaefer's looking over here at this, and he's not excited about the length of this, but I want to read this, and you know, I think it's important that people who are either going to watch this video or people that are in the crowd, I would ask that you take it at face value. That I think so often that people have a tendency to believe that there's a large agenda towards things and that we are pushing one thing in order to actually accomplish something else. So I would say first off that you know, I see this decision tonight as completely independent of boundary adjustment splits. And I know there's a lot of people in the community, and as evidenced by a lot of the feedback that we got in here, that have inextricably linked these two things together. And that they believe that a vote on rebranding equates to a referendum on splits. And in my opinion, it doesn't. And I see those as two completely independent issues. At the end of the day, we're going to have at least one middle school who's split, and currently we have 3 that are split. We spoke during the process of the last boundary adjustment of the importance of middle school students being proud of where they go to school and having an excellent 7th and 8th grade experience. I think there's a lot of things, both tangible and intangible, that go into a student's experience when they're in middle school. I believe, and I think we've consistently heard from the community, that one of those things is most definitely the physical conditions and appearance of the school they attend. Parents at Oakwood can attest to that. I think we go back to Mr. Schaefer's comment. We've heard from numerous parents that go to that school, and I've yet to hear from a parent that has said that the recent upgrades made there haven't made a huge difference at that school. And that is in absolutely no way should take away from the excellent leadership that we've got there. They've done and are continuing to do a tremendous job, and I would certainly rank leadership at these schools as significantly more important than facilities issues. Similarly, the changes that were made at Consolidated High School and College Station High School came online made a huge difference in student opinions and pride about where they went to high school. It's also clear to me, based on the information that we were provided, that there are a number of things, primarily from a cosmetic perspective, that have been deferred at both of our older middle schools as the district continually deals with budgeting priorities and trying to be fiscally responsible while also planning for unexpected maintenance expenditures. I have my only child went through A&M Consolidated, and we went and played basketball at College Station Middle School. We constantly hear comments at both places, I think, of things that people believe need to be fixed that are cosmetic in appearance. And some of those cosmetic things that are also coming due over the next year or two. But I think, and I would ask, I guess, Clark and Mike, that you put this table up online for people to see later on. But you can see interior paint at College Station Middle School is 5 years over its life expectancy. Millwork is 8 years over its life expectancy. Carpet is 3 years over its life expectancy. And that's not to say that, and the list goes on, and things are probably even a little bit more out of date at College Station Middle School than they are at Oakwood. I mean, at A&M Consolidated Middle School. But nonetheless, the majority of these things are all well past probably where we expected them to be. So it's been said before, and certainly worthwhile saying again, that most of the expenditures that are being discussed are expenses that are going to take place regardless of any decision that we make here tonight. I think it's also important to take the time to verbally state that at no point was, I believe, any member of this board requesting that we spend $2 million solely to rebrand the colors and mascots of the middle school. This entire discussion is part of a process. Our process just happens to have to take place in a public setting where everybody can hear board members struggle with issues that are facing our district in meetings that take place 1 month apart from one another. For instance, Dr. Ely, at the request of the board, presented a set of numbers at the last board meeting a month ago that listed any and every possible expenditure that we could have through rebranding and what those costs would be. He presented those numbers and even went as far as to say that this was essentially, I don't remember the exact title we used, but a super duper preliminary rough draft of costs.
I'd like to think that's what he said.
I believe that's pretty much close. And all of those possibilities totaled around $2 million or a little bit more. When we left that the next day in the community, and I think it's partly because that was kind of what was reported, all of a sudden, I think we all ran into a lot of people that basically came saying, I cannot believe you're thinking about spending $2 million on changing colors at the middle schools. And I'm here to say that is just simply not the case. To me, there are two things that create the crux of this issue, to me, right? And I don't think everybody's necessarily on the same page. And I believe they can and should be thought of as relatively independent decisions. The first is, since we have a new middle school coming online next fall, should we prioritize taking care of some deferred maintenance and renovations at our two older middle schools while remaining fiscally responsible? In other words, without jeopardizing any ongoing material or safety maintenance categories, if we can find the money to dedicate to sprucing up the two existing campuses using expenditures that are primarily overdue anyways, should we do it? My answer to that question leans yes. The fact that comparisons matter, and this will be something that happens as students visit or travel to the other schools in our district, regardless of the reason why that visit may occur. We cannot go back and make these 30-year-old schools look or feel completely new again. And I think they're probably older than 30 years. But we can certainly do some things to help from an appearance standpoint, and some of these things are long overdue. Could we push some of them a little bit farther back? I think the answer is a clear yes. We have already pushed them back a number of years. But at some point, they have to be done. And if your goal is to try to create equity across the middle schools, this seems like a good time to push some of those up, which are not necessarily new costs, but maybe we'll choose to do them a couple of years ahead of time. The second issue, which I think Mr. Harris alluded to, is we are going to spend this money on deferred maintenance, refurbishments, renovations, rebranding, you can call it what you want, at some point soon, regardless of the decision we make today or in the future. The question is whether when we do it, should we continue to tie the middle schools to the high schools in the area in terms of colors and logos? I think it's important to note that this decision has nothing to do with the involvement of high school faculty, teachers, and coaches at the middle school level. Nobody up here is saying in any way, shape, or form that the middle schools should operate in a way that they do not interact with the high schools at all. That is not the point. I think that engagement is incredibly important and expected as we move forward. I fully concur with a statement I think that Dr. Ely made at some point, that if we were starting from scratch and looking into the future instead of the past, I believe it's unlikely we would choose to allow middle schools to align so closely to the high schools in terms of colors and logo. I just don't believe we would make that decision. Starting the fall, we now have 3 middle schools going into 2 high schools. As we all know, no matter how the splits are done, 3 does not go into 2 evenly. At a minimum, 1 high school has students going to multiple high schools, and at most, all 3 will. There is no guarantee how zoning will be handled when we add a 3rd high school or when we add a 4th and potentially 5th middle school. Given the life expectancy of the things that we're talking about, and given that we are going to be moving forward with these maintenance and renovations regardless, I personally feel it's probably irresponsible to redo things in maroon and purple and give these middle schools, these associations, for 10 to 20 years, which is going to be the life expectancy of redoing a lot of these things when there's no telling where their students are going to be assigned to high school. I see my job as a school board member is to put our students, teachers, facilities, and district as a whole in the best position moving forward, even if the present changes seem difficult for whatever reason. If one is going to make these upgrades anyways, if all of these things are going to happen, changing colors, logos, mascots, whatever, will never be less expensive than it will be over the next couple of years. It will always be more expensive 4 years, 5 years, 6 years down the road. So it seems to me that it is a logical choice. If we're going to do it, now's the time. I'll leave that there. I've clearly talked a lot at this point. So that was my only way to kind of put everything down and not use poor word choice like fortitude or whatever else might come up at some point. As I expound on things. So there you go. I'll leave it for there.
I think you make a good point, Dr. Wesson, that whatever we do now is going to last at minimum 10 years. And I think that for us to try to predict the future of what junior high kids are going to go to what high school 5 years, 6 years, 10 years from now is just nearly impossible. So you make a real good point. I appreciate that.
Yeah, wanna,
Yeah, let's let
let's
Ms.
let
Barrett.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Dr. Wilson, you did a very nice job of putting all that down on paper. I appreciate that. A couple of things that I think that we continue to talk about is the deferred maintenance. I really do believe that the community doesn't understand that that's not, that we've already planned on using some of that. Could you take a minute and explain once again to those that don't know how our budget and the two different pots of money work, and that, you know, some of this is, so many people think that we're taking away from teachers and education when in fact we have two different parts of money that we have to use a certain way. Would you please expound on that for the community, please?
Ms. Barrett, you know I love talking about
I know you do.
school finance. So I will try to be very brief on this. Basically, yes, the school district budget is funded, has two different budgets and is funded by two different tax rates. The maintenance and operation tax rate, which is $1.04 per $100 of valuation in College Station ISD, and that amount of money goes into paying for the primarily staff. About 80% is in personnel costs, but also materials, supplies, utilities, professional development, those types of things. We have another portion of our tax rate, which is the debt service portion of our tax rate, which is 35.8 cents per $100 of valuation, and that goes to pay the principal and interest on the debt that we have on the bonds that we have passed. And when we have bond elections with in our community, we do those for new facilities. We use bond money to purchase land, and we have in the past several bond issues been authorized by the public to use money for things like purchase of some technology and some buses, and for deferred maintenance. Back in 2011, the state of Texas shorted public schools $5.4 billion. At that point, College Station was left with a hole of $7.5 million in 1 year. And so we have made some changes in how we are able to fund some of this deferred maintenance. So a lot of this has been handled through bond funds, and bond funds can be used for those particular items. Bond funds cannot be used for salaries. Bond funds cannot be used for professional development and those types of things. So we have some ability to do that. And then we also have been working very hard as we develop budgets on the maintenance and operations side to get more money put back in to capital improvement projects so that we can pay for those more of our annual maintenance and operations budget. And for this current year that we're in, we've been able to put some more money in there to help take care of some of our deferred maintenance needs for maintenance and operations as well. I hope it wasn't too confusing, that it got at what you were looking for.
No, it is, and I just want to make sure that people understand that. I think part of the discussion that we've had with a lot of people is that we are not thinking of our teachers, which I know for a fact that these people sitting here think about teachers' salaries and appreciate what they do all the time. And education is our #1 priority with these children. So I just wanted to make certain that everyone understand where the money and deferred maintenance and what that means, because I think a lot of times we assume everyone knows that, and they don't, because it's so convoluted at the state level, not so much what this district does, but it's much more because of the state, how the state operates, which I always encourage people to talk to your state legislators about how we're funded, because they clearly do not get that we need more money at the school level. The other thing too is that when we opened up A&M Consolidated Middle School, there were some refurbishing done then on both schools at the time. Do you remember or recall if there was anything done at that time, how that was handled? I'm looking at history because I'm gonna make a
Consolidated Middle
point.
School. This is my 18th year in the district, and this actually predates me.
Really?
So I might call on the very first principal of A&M Consolidated Middle School, who worked at College Station Junior High before.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. I really appreciate that opportunity. I'll just stand for a second, if that's okay with everyone. So far as the work that was done to A&M Consolidated Middle School at the time, if you remember, there used to be sort of a domed auditorium area, so that was removed at the time. Refurbishment took place in what we call the X building. Some of the the old gym remained from before, as did the old cafeteria, and so that was turned into a choir area, or choir classrooms, if you will. We added a new gym at that time, added new locker rooms, band and orchestra and cafeteria, and then of course refurbished the track and athletic fields.
Yeah, well, that was quite a long time ago too, so.
It was.
It was,
Around
okay, and
2000.
so that's my point, is that is 20 years ago, because I know it happened, okay, this'll date me. My child is gonna turn 30,
Mine already did.
Next
so
week.
It's okay.
and my oldest, and she was part of that split that happened then. And College Station Middle School, because of, I will defer to you too, we thought there would be two middle schools going into one high school, and no one ever projected that we would grow to the point that we've grown today. I think anybody that was here then would attest to that. And so, we made two middle schools maroon because they were going to feed into the one school, because we were all going to be one little happy community. And to be honest with you, there was issues even then, believe it or not, about uniforms, and who got the new uniforms and who didn't get the new uniforms, and who was going to wear maroon one day when they played each other, who was wearing white and who was wearing maroon. And I mean, there were, as crazy as it is, there was craziness on then too about all of that. As we move forward, having lived during that time and had children at that time, and I now see wisdom in the fact that we cannot not know that the community is going to go a certain way, because it so far hasn't done anything as I thought it would go. I was told back many years ago not to buy any property out at Pebble Creek, because I was totally going to lose my money out there. I was ridiculous for thinking about that. And yet, I wish I had bought a ton of property, not only in Pebble Creek, but south of town. I really wish I had done that, because I may be somewhere in Hawaii or something today. I don't know. But my point being that we really need to not only look at what's going on right now, but we really do need to think about the future. And as I look at this decision, I understand that there are people that hold really close values to that maroon color or to that purple color, because that's what they had. My father being one of them, he clearly went up to Dr. Ely and he went to A&M Consolidated Middle School, played ball there, and couldn't believe that, he's told me on several occasions, couldn't believe that I was even thinking about changing the colors there. But I also explained to him that we need to move forward, and it was his fault that all these people were here, because he was inviting everyone to live here. Yeah, the chamber. And so I blamed him completely for the problem. So anyway, I've gone a long way around to say that we owe it to these children to let them have their own identity. And because it's been such a long time since we've refurbished and done maintenance on these things, and we do have them on the schedule to do maintenance, that it's important that all the schools have the same opportunity to have their own identity. The new middle school is going to have their own identity, and we at the very least need to take care of the school that's half purple and half maroon. That's not fair. Because I have people tell me that all the time when I'm at ball games over there, that some of the things that have been done by the PTO, and that that the district itself has not taken care of that, and I take that criticism to heart, because I do understand that they do want it to be nice while they are there, and so and I also agree with everyone that has spoken on this already, that we are not in any way talking about how we are going to be rezoning at this time. This is strictly a decision to say, hey, we want everybody to have a nice place to go to school and something that they can be proud of, because it is important. And I think that anyone who's in here, as mothers, we tell our children to clean up their rooms. It's not only because we want them to clean up their rooms because of us, but we want them to find pride in cleaning up their rooms and having a nice space and a clean space. And we preach that all the time. And I think that that's really important in this decision too, is that we are modeling to them that we want them to have a clean and good space and a place that they can be proud of to go to school. And I do think it's important. Is this important as being academically challenged? No. But is it part of it? Yes. And I think it's important for us to recognize that.
Anybody else? Mr. Harris, I know wants to speak. Mr. Schaefer, do you have anything else you want to say?
I think I agree with a lot that was said tonight. I think that I think it's very important that we make the same steps that we did to the middle school as we did to the intermediate school. And so I think I agree that the misconception is we put refurbish with the term rebranding. So I think it's very important that we look at that.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Thank you. First, I want to thank Dr. Wesson. I thought that was well put together and did a good job of walking through the thoughts. And thank you. I thought you did a very good job. So thank you. Is that better? Okay. The next thing is, I think it can illustrate kind of what we're struggling with. When you said we need to, at a minimum, take care of the school that's half maroon and half purple. Well, the question is, okay, what color do we paint it? Right. I mean, well, half those kids right now are going to one high school and half are going to the other starting next fall. So that's the bind that we're in as we sit down and look at these issues. And the thought that comes into my mind ties into one of his concluding points, and it's something that's really stuck with me. We need to stop spending money on things that we know are going to change. And these colors and school splits over the years, the one thing I do know is that they will have to change as we move through a different number of high schools and a different number of middle schools. So if we have to do it now to be efficient and to go through refurbishment, and while we're doing it, change and go to different colors, I can tell you my personal view is that anything that is painted on the building like millwork and things like that, we should be a neutral color. So no matter where we end up, we don't have to change that. We can do things that have a shorter life expectancy like jerseys and posters and banners for whatever the spirit color or school color is. I want to get that in there. But I think I would answer the questions you ask. Do we make deferred maintenance a priority? I think the answer is yes, for me. And then as we're doing that, do we change a color to help that school build its own identity? I think my answer to that is yes as well. So that we can efficiently make these changes and get these schools on the right path moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with the neutral colors. I think that keeps you pretty safe no matter what you do in the future. And the uniforms can speak for the spirit colors or the school colors. And I agree with that 100%.
Okay. The way that this is written on the agenda gave us an opportunity that we could take action, but it is also on the actual meeting, regular meeting agenda, and in full transparency to allow anyone from the community who would like to speak during the public comment. We will defer any kind of final decision until then. We are kind of on a time line though, because we have 3 meetings tonight, so we're going to go ahead and move on and go on to C2, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the Texas Equity Plan. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Dr. Yokin, members of the board. Are excited to talk a little bit about some of the changes that are coming as a result of the Texas Equity Plan. As you are probably recall, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was more commonly known to us the past decade as No Child Left Behind. That was reauthorized by United States Congress into the Every Student Succeeds Act. And some part of ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is provisions to make sure that students in school districts across America are getting equal access to quality educations irrespective of the type of school they go to and the percentage of poor or rich students who are in those particular schools. So we had to, in years past, do some accounting to the federal government. You will recall the highly qualified reports that we did usually in the fall of the years. Those highly qualified reports do not exist. But now we have the Texas Equity Plan that we must talk about with the state in regards to that. So we have some decisions to make. Kelly Kovacs, Director of Instruction and Leadership Development, has doing a lion's share of this work, along with Dr. Marla Ramirez and Penny Schrammel and others in curriculum instruction. She's going to kind of walk us through a little bit about the Texas Equity Plan and what it'll mean for College Station ISD. Mrs. Kovacs?
Thanks, Dr. Ely. You took my whole first slide, which is great. So really, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of what the Texas Equity Plan is, because it's replaced that commonly used term of highly qualified. And so, as Dr. Ely said, this is really about determining if our low-income students and students of color or any minority that is not white in Title I schools are served at disproportionate rates by either ineffective, out-of-field, or inexperienced teachers. We'll talk about what those mean in just a moment. And if so, we need to take some steps to address those identified disproportionalities. So there's 5 steps that were outlined for us from the state. The first is to include as many stakeholders as we can that are diverse. So we included our District Educational Improvement Council, which includes parents and community members, teachers and administrators. Of course, we worked with the Curriculum and Instruction Department closely, and we addressed or solicited feedback as much as we could from campus and all kinds of district administrative staff in developing this plan. So part of the work that we needed to do too was just to see what is our data telling us. We really looked at 2 areas this year: teacher experience and out-of-field teachers. Teacher experience is actually identified by the state, and inexperienced teachers are considered anyone in their first or second year of teaching. Out-of-field teachers would be also defined by the state as anyone not in their certified field. So if I'm teaching English but my certification is in social studies, I would be considered out of field. And then one of the other things that we needed to do this year was to define what effective teaching is. That happened in collaboration with all of those stakeholders that we talked about. But because those measurements were not in place, and this is addressing our 16-17 data, we don't have any measurements for that yet. We just needed to set the definitions. So we wanted to share with you what the data did show us. Just to identify some areas here on this slide, we're going to look at the top, the high poverty quartile campuses versus our low poverty quartile campuses in both inexperienced, and out-of-field teachers. You'll notice we didn't have any out-of-field teachers in the district, which is great. It really means that we can sort of not work with those particular numbers this year, but we did need to look at inexperience. And so we saw that there was an equity gap between our high poverty campuses and our low poverty campuses by 3%. Just for comparison's sake, we did include the state average there. You can see 14.37% is the state average for that gap. And so below the line there, you can see we also did the same calculation for high minority campuses versus low minority campuses. That had a 2% difference rate. And again, you can see the difference there with the state equity. So since we did have gaps, we needed to develop a plan to address those gaps. And so the next step was really thinking about why those gaps might exist. And we worked very closely with our campus and campus and district administration to think about what was causing those gaps to happen. We'll talk about what the plan ended up being here in just a moment. From that, we selected strategies to address those issues, including anything that we knew that we could measure that would be viable, and we could actually put someone in place saying, okay, this is something that we want you to help us with, so that this was actually a plan we would use moving forward rather than just checking the box that we completed this for the state. Included in the plan is also a progress monitoring plan. So we have identified steps every 3 to 6 months that we'll be looking at and saying, has this happened? Because we feel like this would be a good marker to say we're on our way to making this plan actually happen. And so as a result of all the work, these are the areas that we addressed. And these are these 3 areas: teacher recruitment, teacher support, and retaining teachers are actually the ones that are identified by the state. These were areas that we were supposed to address. And so for recruitment, the group really wants to continue to look at monetary incentives for bilingual staff, particularly in bilingual positions. This is something that we've already started to address, but we want to identify if this is actually helping us in this area. Look at the data, talk to the folks who are filling those positions, and determining what drew them to our area versus those surrounding areas. We also talked very much with our human resources department about, because they have boots on the ground at those career fairs, what is drawing people to College Station versus what other districts are doing. And some of the things that they mentioned are those that you see up there: really utilizing social media, updating our information, having more information available at our career fairs, and utilizing our websites to help with recruitment. In the area of teacher support, we talked a lot about coaching. This is something that much research has been done that talks about the effect that coaching can have on a teacher's career and their feeling of support in their career. And so we really want to add training and requirements for coaching new teachers, but every teacher should have, and every staff member should have the opportunity to be coached. And that's what really we're getting at with the teacher support piece there. For retention of teachers, this is one that we talked a lot about as well, and felt that if we had a clear vision and something like a profile of a learner, that would really help everyone to have a direction moving forward for professional development, training, support, and feeling like they can see where we're going in all areas, including those campuses with high poverty and high minority populations. This is something that we will be not just progress monitoring, but this will be an annual requirement. So we'll be looking at all of these items, but we also may be making changes as we get more information, as we gather feedback, as we survey our teachers as they're coming in, if these things are actually working, and we may make adjustments to this as well, and that's actually the idea with the equity plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
I think it's worth thanking DEIC once again, because they were at the root of a lot of the changes in the process of how we were going to measure some of these things. That's a committee that does a lot of work, that we're going to hear a lot more from them on District of Innovation stuff, and I know they put a lot of effort. So thank you to that group as well.
This was several meetings worth of work for them. We appreciate it.
Good, thank you. We'll move on to C3, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to 2018 board training options. Dr. Ely?
Thank you, Dr. Yokin, members of the board. 2 pieces of paper that are coming around. They have to do with our agenda item here on 2018 board training options. What you'll see in the landscaped version is our traditional TASB summary of all the training requirements for both a new and experienced board member. And so you can see what a first-year board member needs, what an experienced board member needs, and you see that under Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 options. So I incorporate this for reference in case you have any questions on that. really I'd like to walk through the various options that we have that's on the other portrait sheet of paper that says school board training options, and we're looking at for the 2018 school year. Tier 1 is the Texas Education Code. Just want to remind everyone that the orientation, the update to the Texas Education Code, which is about an hour and is available through Region 6 EduHero, is required of everyone, with the exception of Dr. Yokin. Congratulations, you always go above and beyond the call of duty. That is, if we have not gotten that done, please let us know. You should have your information for logging in to be able to make sure that we get that done. And I believe, Carrie, we have to the end of November? November 30th, I believe, is our last day to get that accomplished. So that's under Tier 1 of Texas Education Code. Tier 2 is Team of 8, our team building that you are familiar with. We have had the opportunity the last couple of years to attend the Schlechte Center School Board Conference in Austin. That happens to be this year, January 5th and 6th. That's a Friday and a Saturday. By point of reference, that will be the last Friday of this Christmas break. All kids will come back to school that next Monday, the 8th. We had asked board candidates to put that aside as a desire for the team of 8 to be able to make that commitment, and just kind of want to make sure if that's still the direction that the board wants to go for our team of 8 Tier 2 training, January 5th and 6th, 2018, or if we've got other things that have come up and want to go with another option. So I'm not seeing any.
So, mine's on my calendar.
Okay.
I don't know who everybody else is. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Okay, so that's where we are with Tier 2. Tier 3, just a reminder to the board and members of the audience, these board members, if you're an experienced board member, must get 5 additional annual continuing education hours. First-year board members must get 10 hours. We have traditionally taken care of that at a statewide conference. Excuse me, we've gone the TASA, TASB Annual Conference on Education, which is usually the last week of September or the first week of October in either Dallas or Austin. That is a all-day Friday, all-day Saturday, and early on Sunday type of an event. I did note that we had 5 of the 7 were able to attend this last year. I know that is during football season, and we have different of our own personal kids that are involved in different activities, as well as other activities that are important in this community, like Aggie football. If we want to look at this to continue to go to this conference or not, I've got some other options there that might be available to us. We don't have to decide today, but I wanted to at least get these in front of you, and I'll just identify those other options. The National School Boards Association, which I don't believe we've ever gone to, certainly not in the 18 years that I've been in College Station ISD. It's actually going to be in San Antonio this year. And it is going to be there in April 7th to the 9th. That's a Saturday through a Monday. If that's an option that we might want to look into and going and having a different experience with more of our peers from the nation. TASB also does a smaller conference in the summer that they call their Summer Leadership Institute for board training. They have 2 different options. One is always held in San Antonio and one is in Fort Worth. And you can see the dates on that. Those are both Thursday through Sunday opportunities. And the first one in San Antonio is June 14th through the 16th in 2018. And the Fort Worth one is June 28th through 30th. So I guess the first part of this, I'd like to wonder if we would be able to make the Schlechte Conference for the team of 8. It looks like we are on board for that. And then I guess I'd just love to entertain a conversation about board training moving forward, if we want to continue to stick with the annual TASB convention or try some other options for us. With that, I'd love to hear the conversation.
Anybody have an opinion?
Well, the TASB and its timing does not work out well for me unless it's a bye week. So, as you all know, I had commitments Thursday night and Friday night and Friday morning here. So that's a difficult thing for me to make work in the fall at this particular point.
Perhaps everybody can look at their calendar and come back
Correct.
next time, and the individuals that are here can compare what they think would work best for them.
That's fine. We've
But now
got plenty
you,
of,
but now you all have the options. You can go back and check with your significant others and see what works.
so absolutely. And yeah, we don't, the tier 3 stuff, we've got a little bit of time on that. Did just want to make sure that we were all available for the team of 8 then.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to C4, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to TASB Policy 109. Dr. Ely.
Dr. Yokin, members of the board, TASB Policy Update 109 was just received about a week ago. We sent that information, the vantage points, to you through the weekly transmittal. It's about 11 pages summarizing some of the changes to policy that will be provided. We'll give you some more information over the next month. Our goal would be to have this as an action item at the December meeting. It's just early on this. We want to give you an opportunity. If you had any questions or you'd like some more information on any of these items that you saw here for us to be able to get to you, we're happy to do so. But again, we will be giving you some more information on some of these changes out via transmittal and for our consideration at the December meeting.
Does anybody have any questions at this time? Okay, with that, we'll adjourn and we will come back at 6:45. Thank you.
6:45, we have a public hearing.